Are there any children about? No? Okay. Well, again, I would invite all of you to bring your child mind to our little story today. This is called A Beautiful Friendship. Once there was a beautiful woman who used to walk through the streets of the town, and everywhere she went, she was noticed. Everyone in town wanted to talk to her, listen to her, ask her questions, and spend time with her. In the same town, there was a poor girl dressed in rags. She too was very beautiful, but no one ever noticed her or wanted to have anything to do with her. She was lonely and sad. She would gaze at the beautiful, finely dressed woman and see how much attention everyone paid to her. And she wished so much that people would pay attention to her. She had so much in her heart that she wanted to share, but no one would listen. So one day, the poor girl in rags plucked up courage to speak to the beautiful lady in the fine clothes. "Please," she said timidly, "excuse me, but may I ask a favor?" The fine lady, who was a very kind person, turned around at once and smiled at the poor girl. "Of course," she replied. "What can I do for you?" "Well," ventured the poor girl, "it's like this. You are very beautiful and finely dressed, and everyone takes notice of you. But I am poor and have no fine clothes, and no one ever notices me. It would make me so very happy if just one day I might hide myself inside your beautiful cloak and walk around with you through the town. Then whenever people stop to notice you, they would also be paying attention to me. And I think I have something important to tell them that they would value if they only knew." The fine, elegant lady readily agreed to the poor girl's request. So the very next morning, she wrapped her fine cape around the poor girl, and they walked together through the town. Everywhere, as usual, people stopped to admire the fine lady, and when they did so, they also paid attention to the poor girl wrapped in the fine lady's clothing. As they walked, the fine lady talked with the poor girl. She asked about her and was very interested in everything she had to say. She discovered just how wise the poor ragged girl actually was, and they quickly became the best of friends. So much so that after that day, they never wanted to be parted. To this day, they still walk through the world together. And the name of the poor little girl in rags, she was called Truth. And her great friend in the beautiful clothes, whom everyone admires, her name is Story.
Thank you, Victor. Jules will be reading a moment of reflective silence, which will be followed by us singing Spirit of Life. Jules.
Okay. So I hope not to trigger anybody, but this is titled A Unitarian Universalist Confession. So get ready, we're in confessional now. Here we are gathered, humanist and Christian, non-theist, Buddhist and Jew, pagan and seeker, a Unitarian Universalist congregation. Let us confess what we know to be true. We are quick to proclaim our faith, but slow to live the teachings of that faith as it has been handed down to us across every generation, from prophets, preachers, and sages, scientists, historians, and poets, great thinkers of every age, from ordinary women and men who would have us understand what it is to be and what it is to love the neighbor. We are quick to judge one another, but slow to act for justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. We are quick to ignore or smooth over broken places among us, too fearful to work for peace and healing. We are quick to share our knowledge, but slow to temper that knowledge with the love and wisdom that leads us always closer to the truth. In small and large ways, we are overwhelmed by all we cannot do. For all the times we fail to affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of every person, when we do not affirm and promote the goal of a world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all, when we live as though interdependence were a personal choice and not a fact of our existence, we ask forgiveness of one another, and we vow to begin again in this and every moment.
I will introduce our speaker today. Quite a few years ago, I was sitting in a restaurant in Sheridan. It happened to be my favorite restaurant, Oliva's, which is now closed, and I'm so sad. But I overheard a group of people who were out for dinner, sharing a meal together, and I started to eavesdrop. I don't like to do that, but I couldn't help myself. And these people were being impeccable with their word. These were heartfelt words, and they were all positive. They were speaking about someone, which, is kind of dangerous territory. But I realized with joy in my heart that it was Jules' craft that they were talking about, and they were just saying what a breath of fresh air she was to the educational community. And I know that in your work with your students, you embody the spirit of our first principle, respecting the inherent worth and dignity of your students, your colleagues, and we're very fortunate to have you here in our group where you live that same principle. But Jules, I wanted to make sure you knew, at least at that moment in time, that your professional community was all behind you. So please help me welcome our own Jules Craft as she shares her original words with us from her viewpoint on dignity.
Well, that is a very, very kind introduction. And I must say, I'm about to, oh, let me unplug. And I got to say, I'm probably about to, like everything I'm about to say, I'm going to kind of refute what you just said. I'm a little self-deprecating in this particular talk. So, I mean, hopefully I don't tear it down too much. Okay, so thank you, Michelle. The theme of worth and dignity is such a buoying topic. It feels really good to affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of every person. I read that first principle and think that I'm doing a really great job at being a great person the one time a week that I think about or attend the fellowship. I gotta say though, after reading the talks given by Mary and Michelle this month, my viewpoint on my own excellence of character has changed a little. How good am I really at affirming this principle, and do I actually practice it? In the most cliche and high school term paper type of way, I went to the dictionary to help me better understand the topic. The Oxford Dictionary defines principle as a rule or belief governing one's personal behavior. This viewpoint actually really helped me. It put the principle into a framework of preserving my own dignity through my own conduct. The Dalai Lama cleared it up even further for me. And yes, I'm sticking with the theme of cliches for this moment by quoting the Dalai Lama at a UU service. He said, "The purpose of religion is to control yourself, not to criticize others." To add yet another viewpoint here, I was talking with a friend the other day who lent me a valuable insight. He said, "Our faith isn't a window through which we see the world, but a mirror in which we see ourselves." So what am I supposed to do with that? Will I like what I see when I look into that faith mirror? I know myself, and I know that I'm not tremendously gifted at the art of patience or generosity all the time. It seems like both are kind of base level requirements for practicing that principle. But isn't that just what this is? It's practice. To me, practice means trying something over and over and making adjustments and failing and trying again and hopefully making incremental progress toward a goal. Kind of like in the readings I shared this morning. And isn't that kind of the purpose of a fellowship, to continually fail upward and help each other refocus on the ideal? The first principle is an ideal. It wouldn't even be worth mentioning if it weren't challenging and difficult and worth working at. The word inherent is right in that first principle, but that doesn't mean it's going to come easily to us. The easy part is affirming every person's worth and dignity. The hard part is being around other people. Sometimes there are folks in the world who just don't appear to have inherent worth or dignity. Homophobes, sociopaths, megalomaniacs, bigots, liberals. Just kidding. How can I make myself see their value in my world? In my mind, I have to put it into a different frame, and I'm going to equate it to the practice of meditation. Some of you may know of Sam Harris. He's a neuroscientist and meditation practitioner, and he said the following on mindfulness meditation. I'll try and say it in his voice. He's got a very thoughtful voice. Of course, the real obstacle to doing this successfully is distraction, getting lost in thought. And so thoughts are continually arising and you're getting pulled away from the object of meditation. And then you bring your attention back to the breath or to sounds or to a visualization or a mantra, whatever you're focusing on. As concentration builds, this can become more and more successful. Attention can rest on the object of meditation for longer periods of time. And if you're practicing mindfulness, you can get good enough so that you can even notice thoughts arising as objects in consciousness, rather than just be merely taken away by them in each moment. End quote. I was once referred to as the poster child for adult ADHD. And while that may not have been the most accurate statement, I can admit to being easily distracted. So yeah, Sam Harris, I guess you could say I have some obstacles in the way of checking myself and seeing every person's worth and dignity. So I want to make a parallel argument here that kind of provides another broader viewpoint. I'm trying to bring in as many viewpoints as I can on how I internalize the first principle. So it seems like most of the world's religious or even just general conflict is due to one group imposing their principles on another group, or just using those principles as scales of judgment. There are too many examples of this to recount, but I'm sure that the Crusades or persecution of Jews by Egyptian pharaohs or Christians being fed to lions by Romans may come to mind. On a more personal level, I once had this delightful friendship with the wife of an Episcopal priest. After more than a year of just friendship and gatherings and thoughtful intellectual conversation, she made a discovery that I did not hold or do not hold as a personal belief that Christ's death on a cross absolved me of all sin. And our friendship came to a pretty abrupt end when she expressed how very sad she was to have learned that I'll be going to hell. Here I was thinking we had this beautiful personal connection. My bad. So considering these big picture historical persecutions and the kind of lesser known micro judgments, what good does it do to use our personal metrics of what makes a person good or bad on other people? It seems that that practice has historically caused a pretty good amount of pain and suffering. And what species are we anyway? Immanuel Kant says that we're distinguished above all other animals by our self-consciousness. And Shakespeare's Hamlet marveled at our species. What a piece of work is man! How noble in reason, how infinite in faculties, in form and moving, how express and admirable, in action, how like an angel, in apprehension, how like a god, the beauty of the world, the paragon of animals, and yet, to me, what is this quintessence of dust? The oracle Pythia wrote on the temple doorway, "Know thyself." These statements show pretty clearly that Homo sapiens have now and probably have always had a pretty deep capacity for self-reflection. Studies in education and psychology show that self-reflection has a profound effect on self-reported learning and joy and self-efficacy. I feel like that can apply to this topic too. If I use the first principle as a meter stick for myself, instead of using it on others in the world, the likelihood of my learning and joy and self-efficacy increasing is much better. In the talk that Michelle read last week, Reverend Victoria Weinstein mentioned the age-old argument folks have with our first principle. Well, what about Hitler or Idi Amin? Do they have inherent worth and dignity? I think after looking at all the viewpoints that I've been looking at in the last week or two, I'm coming to a new conclusion that, like in response to that question, that it doesn't necessarily matter whether or not I affirm another person's worth or dignity. In fact, I diminish my own worth and dignity simply by questioning theirs. And don't get me wrong here, I do believe that as a society, it's our responsibility to recognize atrocities and to stand up to those who perpetrate them. It's just that in this moment, not every person whose worth or dignity I question is persecuting others or committing acts of atrocity. So after hearing the wisdom brought forward the last 2 weeks, I've realized that I give a lot of energy away by being annoyed or just downright incensed by the actions of others, the seeming thoughtlessness of people around. But I really think I can do better. I can instead build up my stores of energy by turning my attention starkly inward and practicing that buoying art of seeking the good in others and seeking to understand. If I spend a little less time questioning whether or not this person has inherent worth and dignity, or worrying so much about affirming theirs, if I instead use the mirror to look in and reflect on whether or not I am practicing this and whether or not I am choosing to find the good in people, then that is where I will find the joy. That self-reflection is where I will find a little bit more peace of heart. And the practice of this self-reflection and the failing over and over again, and the having of a church group and a church family to consistently bring my focus back to that, even when I am proving to be the adult poster child of ADHD, that is where I will find a little bit of growth. So this is my current viewpoint on dignity, and may it be so.
Please join me in singing hymn number 354.